Hello everybody, this is Joe/FoozleCC, and today we're going to be covering how to implement Google Sign-In with Playfab on an Android build for Construct 3. So let's go ahead and jump on it. So I already did a very brief intro on Playfab, link up above, on how to authenticate and log in to Playfab from Construct 3. Today we're going to be continuing that with sharing some of the best practices on how to do login, and specifically demonstrating it on Google Sign-In for an Android build. So Playfab, as a reminder, is an awesome backend as a service tool for our games. It allows users to store data there, they can play across devices or even platforms, and it can do a whole bunch of other stuff. But that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Now, in order to do this, we are going to be using a paid plugin. In the previous tutorial, I talked about, well, there's a paid version and there's a free way to use the JavaScript SDK. I'm going to be using the awesome Construct Master Collection that is a paid plugin. So just know that as we get into it, I am using a paid plugin. So let's go in now and talk about what we're going to be doing. Okay, so at a high level, this is what we're going to be attempting to integrate across our tools for login. Now, I'm only going to be focusing on a specific subset of this, and specifically it's going to be Android and Google Sign-In. These other ones are other topics that I'll probably cover in future tutorials, but at a high level, this is a practice that you can do for logging in to Playfab from your Construct 3 games. Let's kind of walk through this now to kind of ground ourselves. So on the start of layout, the first thing you need to do is, well, what platform am I on? And let's just say in your use case, you want to do web, Android, and iOS. Well, for iOS and Android, you can log in right away to Playfab and create an account automatically using the device ID that's stored. So that's great. For web, you actually have to generate a random ID and then log in with custom ID. Once you're in there, you've now done what's called like a frictionless login, right? So there was no, hey, please type in your email, any of these things. You're in the game and you have an account and it's created on Playfab. Once you do that though, you want to check a few things. First, have they already bound an account, or is this a brand new install of the game, or maybe they haven't bound the account yet, but they've been playing for a while? Well, subtly in your game, you need to prompt them, hey, you know what? You should really bind your account so that you don't lose your data. Or you can, play on another device. Say you're on your phone and your tablet and you want to play on both and have the same data. Well, you have to prompt them to do this in order to be able to do that. And once they say, okay, yep, I'm going to do this, I'm going to click on, yep, I'm going to link my Facebook account or my Google account. There's a couple tools I'm going to walk through today, specifically from the Master Collection, the Google Sign-In, that allows you to log in with Google. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to do that I'm going to cover on how to set this up to actually enable it to work. Once you actually have done that, you get a server auth code from Google, which then you can pass to Playfab to actually log in and link the account through the Construct Master Collection Sync Manager. And now, after you've gone through this process, you have an account that has both the device ID and the Google ID. And because of that, now if you log in on another device, you're able to say, hey, you know what? I actually already have an account. So even though I logged in frictionlessly and I created this account automatically when I switched to my iPad or my tablet, well, now I can say, hey, I'm going to log in with Google and I'm going to pick up where I left off. And you can do that, and you can log into Google, go through and log into your account, and then bind the new device. And you picked up where you left off, and now you actually have more than one device saved to that account, and that's pretty cool. So let's dive in and talk about what are all the things that we need to do to enable, for an Android build on Construct 3, the ability to log into Google, sync it with Playfab, and be able to have more than one device storing information on your backend. Okay, so this is the editor that we're going to be using for our demo here. And specifically, all it is a set of buttons that execute some of those other boxes that we saw before on the Miro board. And I'm going to be focusing on the login to Google, the syncing, and the device. Logging into Google takes quite a bit of setup actually for you to figure out how to do that and how to get the credentials that you need in order for this to work. I'm also going to cover how you can test that this works inside of Android Studio. So let's keep going and let's see how long this tutorial takes. We've got this editor set up and we've got our game ready to be built, right? But there's some things that we need to do. Let's jump over now to our Google Play console, which is where you're actually going to deploy your Android builds. So Google Play console, if you have not signed up, you have to sign up, and it does cost, I think, $25. Once you're in here, you can go ahead and create an app. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, this app name, we're going to call Playfab Login Test. Very original. It's going to be a game, and it's going to be free. Now, we're going to go ahead and confirm, hit Create App. When you do this, it's going to create a new environment for this app. And there's a whole bunch of setup that you can do in here. This is where you do all of your Play Store listing, all your images. There's a ton of stuff in here. So we're going to focus on just the essentials in order to test that this is working with Playfab. The thing that we want to eventually get to is I want to come down here to internal testing, because we're going to start with internal testing. I want to drop in a build from construct, and I want it to somehow work. Now, in order for that to happen, after I drop that in, it's going to ask a bunch of questions. But I also need to come down here to the Play Games Services, Setup and Management Configuration. Now, before we jump into this, let me go back to the mirror board and let's talk about this for a little bit. There are some things that we need to do in order to basically say that, to get everything communicating correctly. And you're going to be bouncing between the Google Play console and the Google Cloud console, and then also your construct environment. So the Google Play console, we just did this, create app in Google Play console. And then under the configuration, we're going to select no next, and we're going to do that next, but let's kind of look ahead a little bit before we go and execute all this. And then you're going to have to actually bounce over to your Google Cloud platform, and it's going to create the app inside of the Google Cloud platform automatically for you, which is nice. But you have to create your Oauth consent screen, and then you have to go through and start building out these lists of credentials that you list inside of Google Cloud that basically says, yep, I'm good. And there's going to end up being a few in here and possibly a fourth or more, depending on how you set this all up, before all this will actually work. And you can hit that button that says login, and it brings up, yep, let me log into this account, and yep, I trust it, and yes, okay, I'm in, and oh, by the way, Playfab sees it, so let's go through all that. Okay, so this is where we're at in our journey. So we're gonna select no under the configuration, and we're gonna have them create it automatically. So no, my game doesn't use any Google APIs. We're gonna automatically create this game name, Playfab login test. Let's go ahead and create. Okay, so that's going ahead and submitting, and it's automatically going to be creating this inside of our cloud console. And then once it's done, like it is right now, you're actually able to see some new sections over here. And it's basically saying, okay, let's link your credentials. But before we can do that, we have to go and create them. So let's go and do that. All right, so it says how to configure your OAuth consent screen. Go to the OAuth consent screen setup page in the Google Cloud platform. All right, so once we're in here, if you click on that link, it takes you directly to your project that you just created and your OAuth consent screen. So I'm going to create an external, hit create. I'm going to call this Playfab login test, use support. And as far as domains here, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and throw in some of the links here. All right, that'll work. And then authorized domains, let's add foozle.io and support at foozle.io. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit save and continue. And then for scopes, you are going to have to add a couple of scopes in order for this to work. Let's just add these first two. I believe this is all that you need in order for it to work with Playfab. And let's hit update. All right. And then we're going to go ahead and hit save and continue. And then the next thing that we want to do is we're going to add some test users. I'm going to type in foozletester1@gmail.com, hit add, and There we go. Hit save and continue. And then we've got our summary. Let's just go ahead and hit back to dashboard. All right, so now we have our OAuth consent screen. We now need to create our credentials. So let's go over to the credentials section. Now, right away when you come in here, like, all right, well, what am I going to do? Now, coming on back to our Miro board, you see that we need to create these three credentials. So let's go ahead and start marching through those. The very first one I'm going to create is the web client. Let's hit create credentials. Let's create an OAuth client ID. Select web application. I'm going to leave it just like that. And hit create. We're going to have to come back here and edit this later on with some things that we do for Playfab. But for now, just go ahead and create this. All right, now we were just given our client ID and our client secret. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to come down, go to your Google sign-in, and let's go ahead and put that into here. So reverse client ID, let's put that, and then just because we have it, let's throw this into here. Okay, so now we have our client ID and our reverse client ID inside of the Google sign-in. So that's good. Let's keep going. So now that we have this created, let's go back to the Google Play console. Let's go ahead and hit refresh. All right, now what we're going to do is underneath credentials, we're going to hit add credentials. We're going to actually select game server, and we'll leave that as is. Hit refresh, and let's select our web client. Hit save changes. All right, phenomenal. So we got our first one set up. Now remember, we have to create three. So we've created the web client ID. Now it's time to create the Android client 1 ID, or whatever you want to call it. And what this one's going to be is the one that we create when we export our project. So let's go back into construct and prepare to export our project. I'm going to save ourselves some heartache and actually temporarily jump over to Playfab just so that we can get our Playfab ID. Okay, so now that we're in Playfab, if you haven't created an account, go ahead and create an account. Eventually you'll get to like your studio and titles. There'll be like a demo project there, and go ahead and create a new game. So new title, let's call this Playfab login test. It is a idle game because we will not do anything. You don't really need to select any of this. Go ahead and hit create title. And what you want to do is you want to go and get your Playfab title ID, which is something that you're going to have to plug into the Playfab API plugin provided by Master Collection. So underneath here, let's come in here and get your title ID. Let's go back over to here, find your Playfab API plugin, and then place it into here. All right, so now that we've placed in our Playfab API title ID, as well as our Google sign-in information for our client ID, we're ready to do an export from construct to create our next credential, which is going to leverage a key store that we create during export. So let's go to menu, project, export, Android, next. And I'm going to create a signed release APK. And when you do that, you can put in whatever, some sort of version code. Each time you do this and you upload it to the test store, this does need to be unique. Otherwise, it'll give you an error when you try to upload your APK. And you'll come down here and you'll see, okay, signing, choose and create. So let's go ahead and create a key store. Okay, so you type in some information. I'm from Milwaukee, so I'll put that in there. And then alias, I'm going to call this production's fine. And validity, I think you need to have at least 25. Let's just put 50. And I'm going to call this password, super secure. All right, we're good. Production and password. Now you do want to make sure that you remember this. Otherwise, you'll have issues using it for signing later. And you do need to make sure that what you create here, you save somewhere. So let's go ahead and hit create. Okay, so it gave us our SHA-1 signature, and this is worth writing down. So you will want to save this somewhere. Okay, so I'm putting it into this random folder here underneath this tutorial. So I placed it there, and then let's go back and now navigate to choose that and select it. And it's going to ask you for your alias, which you need to have remembered. Ours was production, and our password was password. Let's go ahead and next. And it's going to go ahead and build our project. Okay, now that it's done building, let's go ahead and download it. Let's save it to our folder. And let's keep going. Now, I'm going to give you a quick peek of what the event sheet does look like in here. Really, all these buttons do is they point to the specific plugin. So for Google Sign-In, you've got login, log out, disconnect, silent login, and et cetera, for each of these buttons. There's a specific action that's tied to it. And then there's a whole bunch of callbacks that basically are going to display some debug information in that white box down below. So let's keep going. Okay, so we've got our APK. Let's go back to Google Play Console and let's go back to testing, internal testing. Now, once you're here, it's going to ask you, do you want to do play app signing? And this is an important step. You're going to hit continue, and this is actually going to become our third credential. So we still haven't created our second one yet. We're going to do that here soon. But long story short, you're going to have your upload credential and you're going to have your play app signing credential. So let's go ahead and hit continue. We will allow them to do this. And now that you've said okay, you can go ahead and drag in your APK. So that loads on up. Okay, now that it's loaded, you can come down here. You've got a release name, testing, and let's hit save. Let's hit review release. And it's going to give us an error that we don't have testers. It's going to give us an error that we also don't have our privacy policy set. So if you scroll all the way on down here to app content and click on this button, you'll see where the privacy policy is. Let's go ahead and hit start. Let's enter in your URL or whatever your privacy policy is. Hit save. And then let's go on back to our internal testing. Let's hit review release. Let's see. Okay, so there aren't any errors, but it does give us this warning that we haven't specified any testers yet. Now, in order to set up your testers, you do need to come down here and underneath Play Game Services, underneath testers, you go in there and it allows you to enter in whatever emails you want to use to test your game. So go ahead and do that. And then come on back and let's go ahead and edit release. Let's review release and start rollout to internal testing. Okay, so now that we've done that, it's ready theoretically to be promoted to your testers and for them to be able to download it from the App Store. However, there's still some credentials that we have to set up that we talked about before. So if you navigate to your testers tab, you'll actually see a link where you can download or where you can copy an invite link to email it to your testers as well. So underneath here, we added that initial web application credential. And if you come to our Google Cloud Console, you'll see that we created a web client, but there's still those two Android clients that we have to set up. So first, let's go ahead and set these up before we invite our testers for them to go and download it so that everything will work appropriately. So let's go ahead and create a credential. Let's go to Oauth Client ID. Let's go to Android Client 1. Your package name, if you go back to construct, should be whatever you put in here. So it typically is like com.yourcompany.yourapp. So mine is Oauth Playfab login test. Come on back here. Let's put that in. And then it's asking for that certificate fingerprint. So let's go ahead and pull up our notepad where we saved it during our build. So let's copy it, place it into here, hit create, and we are good to go. Hit OK. Now, the other one that we need to do is that was our upload client credentials. We need to do our play app signing credentials as well. And in order to get that, you come over here to setup, and under app integrity, you'll see your app signing and your app upload key certificate. So that should match what you came out of construct, right? So this is for our play app signing. So let's go ahead and copy this. Let's go over to Google Cloud. Let's hit create credentials, Oauth Client ID, Android Client 2. Let's copy that in while we have it. Come back over here, copy that so we can get our package name. And now we have our play app signing SHA-1 as well loaded here. All right, so we've created both of these credentials now. So our page looks exactly how it should. If you come back to Google Play Console and you come down to your configuration, let's go ahead and add those as well underneath Android. So let's add credential, Android, let's do client 1, save changes, and let's talk about this for a second. So what you want to put inside of this configuration for Android should be your upload ID. So what you created inside a construct is what you want to put here. And you only want to put the Play app signing in the credentials here. So now we're actually good and we're set up. All right, we're doing pretty good. So what this is now set up to do is theoretically it will allow us to go and download from the App Store our game, sign on in, and things should work. What we haven't done yet is on the Playfab side, go and set that up to actually work with Google Sign-In to be able to link our account. So let's go over to Playfab and do that now. All right, so when you're in this environment, let's go down to your add-ons, come into here and select Google. Okay, and once you're at this screen and it asks you for this information, the ones that you really need for your authentication is this client ID and the client secret. So let's go ahead and grab that from the web application credential inside your cloud console. Okay, so you come in here, let's hit edit. Let's grab our client ID. Let's copy that. Come back over here. And then also let's go on back. Let's get our secret. Copy that. And go ahead and paste this. And that should be all you need for authentication. If you are doing Google receipt validation, you need to add these as well. Other tutorials on that. So let's go ahead and hit install. So now we have that installed and it's good to go. So, all right, we've now linked Google Playfab with our Google Cloud Console with our Google Play Console so that when our testers download the app and they go through and they play it, theoretically, they should now be able to log in to Playfab, also log into Google, and then sync that to their Google account. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that and test and see if it worked. All right, so in order to test that this worked, I'm actually going to go into Android Studio and go into my virtual device manager, and I'm going to run a emulator that has the Play Store. So you need to make sure you choose one that has the Play Store and hit play. Okay, so this is booting on up. I'm gonna have to go through because it's basically a new phone. I'm gonna have to sign in to my tester accounts. I'm going to click on the invite link, which I have not sent. So I will send that right now and come right back to this. Okay, and then once you have your emulator open, go ahead and click on the Play Store button, and then you'll go ahead and sign in. Okay, and then once you're in here, you have your Google account set up on the emulator. You can go ahead and go to your Gmail on here and similarly sign in and accept that invite link. Take me to Gmail. Come over here, accept your test link. Okay, and once you're here, you can go ahead and click install. Do note that if you don't see it on this page, you might have to go back and give some more information to how to set it up in the store. You have to have a certain amount of information filled out before you actually see it here. And let's keep going. And voila, we're opening up our game on an emulator that was downloaded from the game store or from Play Store. So that's pretty awesome. Let's keep going. All right, so we've got a bunch of simple buttons here. Theoretically, our login to Google should work. There's a couple things we have to still do. One last thing we have to do before Playfab will work. But largely, this thing's should be ready to rock and roll. Let's go ahead and hit login to device as if we were implementing our silent login or our no friction login. So let's do that. Let's see if that worked. Succeeded. Okay, we have our Playfab session ticket. That's fantastic. Let's go ahead and look over at Playfab on players and see if we can see our newly created device. There it is. Okay, so we have our device. That's awesome. Let's go back to our emulator. Now, if I go and I try to log into Google, I think it's going to work. I think this part will work. Let's see. Foozle tester 1. All right. So that's awesome. So, this is what's gonna show up to all the different people that you're doing Google sign in with. So go ahead and hit allow. And if we zoom in on here, you'll see it gives you a whole bunch of information. Now we haven't signed into Google on Playfab yet. We just logged into Google. So what we need to do now is use the server auth code that we just got through the Google sign-in and give that to Playfab to do this step shown over here. So we've logged into Google, but now we need to log in with Google Playfab. Now, one thing that we didn't do quite yet is we actually need, if we go back to our cloud, if we go back to our cloud environment, if you come in here underneath web client, you need to come in here and actually add an authorized JavaScript origin. And specifically, if we go and look at our title settings and go over to API features and go to this endpoint here, let's go ahead and copy this and put this in place. Okay, and then what you have to do is you have to go and you have to paste that into the JavaScript origin here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's get rid of the slash. And then also for the redirect, if you come over here to one of the tutorials, you have to put in this URI. So I'm going to copy this, come back to my console, and put that right here for redirect, and hit save. And now I believe this will work appropriately. So let's go ahead and see. Let's go back to our guy, and let's hit login to Google and see if that was successful. Looks like it succeeded. All right, Google login succeeded. All right, so this is kind of cool. Now, if we go over to our player account here, our players list, and hit search, we should see two. And we do. We see the Android device and we see the Google. And they aren't linked yet. So remember, on our workflow, we've done the login with Google, the login with Google Playfab. Now we need to bind it to the device. So we need to sync the device. So coming back then to our little test here, I'm going to hit this sync to device. And that said it succeeded. And now what we should see, if I go ahead and I click into here, we're going to see the Android device ID inside of my Google account. And that's how it works. And now, if you were to go and do this on a separate Android device, like a tablet or a different phone, you could go through the same process, log into Google, sync that device ID to the account, and it would also be linked. Now, one thing to note here is that inside of the Playfab environment, it only shows you the most recent Android device ID that you've logged into, but they both will still work to log in. So if you go back to the other device and you log in and it does that initial login through device ID, it will still take you to this account. It just will then, now the next time you look in here, it'll show you that new device as the device ID, but you won't see a big list here of device IDs showing up inside of your Playfab environment. Okay, everybody, so we managed to go from creating a app in the Play Store, setting up our Google Cloud credential environment, and then setting up our Playfab to be integrated with these environments so that inside of our app we created inside of Construct 3, we can log in, get our session ticket through Playfab, frictionless using the device ID, prompt the user to sync using Google. Using Google sign-in, we're able to go through that process, get the server auth code, let Playfab use that to then log in, and then through that we're able to then sync the device ID to that account. And now what we can do is pass data back and forth between devices. We can even do it between platforms as we sync other device IDs, even iOS, or maybe it's a custom ID that you created on the web. And that's one of the beautiful things about Playfab. So With that said, everybody, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing, giving me a thumbs up. It's free for you to do, and it makes a big difference for me. Sorry for the length of this, but there was a lot of little details in here that I wanted to actually show you how it would be like for you to walk through this yourself. I do know that the Master Collection does come at a price tag, but it is a pretty awesome set of plugins, and I heavily recommend it. And with that said, everybody, have a nice day, and I'll talk to you soon.